Hello, hello. Welcome. We're going to give everyone just a minute here to join. So as you're coming in, let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. I'm joining you from Nashville, Tennessee. Jamie, you're in Omaha?
Yes, I am. It is like 105 degrees here today.
Yes, I think it's about the same here. It's very hot and humid. So great. Austin, Ireland, Chicago, couple Chicago.
Oh my gosh.
Denver, Atlanta, Rome. Amazing.
Hello, hello.
This is so great to see.
Oh my gosh. Well, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you're seeing this from today. So great. Awesome. We'll give everyone another minute or so to join and we'll get started here.
LA. Very cool.
Right.
Want to get started, Jamie?
Let's do it.
Awesome. If you want to kick it over to the next slide, we can do some quick introductions.
You got it.
Hi, everybody. We are so excited to chat with you today. I'm Kelsey Kingdon. I'm the marketing strategist here at Workshop. I'm joined by the lovely Jamie Bell. Jamie, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. I'm VP of Marketing at Workshop.
We are so excited. So just a few things before we get started. If you have any questions as we go ahead and drop those in the Q&A and we'll answer them in real time as we go on. And then we've also allotted a little bit of time at the end so we can answer additional questions there. I also want to mention that we have a ton of great resources and templates that we're going to touch on today. We'll drop them links to the templates in the chat in real time. But don't worry, we're going to also send a follow-up email that will have the recording, the slides, all the resources we cover, and we'll also answer any unanswered questions that we don't get to. So, Jamie, am I forgetting anything?
No, I think that sounds great.
All right, well, let's go ahead and get started. So, the reason why, a little bit of background, why we wanted to talk about this topic is we found in our 2023 trends report that measuring results is the #1 challenge internal communicators are currently facing. So we really wanted to dive into some direct and indirect ways that you can measure your efforts and also provide you with some resources along the way. So the next slide will kind of show, this is a snapshot of what we'll be covering today. So we're going to talk through some direct email metrics. This is going to be like your open rate, your click-through rate, and your time read. We'll also talk through some direct comms metrics. These are things like surveys you can run or audits you can conduct to kind of track your strategy and your efforts. And lastly, we'll also touch on indirect comms metrics. So these are things like employee engagement data, marketing metrics, and progress towards company goals. So before we dive into content, Jamie, did I forget anything?
No.
Awesome. Well, I'm going to kick it over to Jamie. She's going to start us off with some direct email metrics.
Thank you, Kelsey. Yeah, we're going to dive in here. We're going to start with email metrics, but really when we talk about direct metrics, we're looking at things that are the metrics that you can directly affect. So if you're coming up with goals or looking at specific things for your internal communications team or kind of key performance indicators that you want to sort of measure and goal off of, this is going to be the best place to focus. So we will talk about some like indirect things like employee engagement is always like our favorite example there. You can do some things to kind of move the needle, but you shouldn't be directly goaling yourself on that employee engagement data. So these are the best things for an internal communications role to kind of goal off of. We're starting with email because there are a ton of changes and different things that have moved around as far as like email data goes. And to kind of call back to our internal comms trends report, we did find that email was the #1 channel that you're using for internal communication. So that holds true kind of across the board. But when we look at email metrics and kind of engagement with those, that sort of content form, there are a few direct metrics that we recommend tracking. We'll go through each of these sort of individually, but just to kind of kick it off and get a sense of how you're tracking those email metrics today, we want to start off with a little poll and just see what tool are you using for internal email today. We'll be able to kind of tailor some follow-ups for you based on that, and get a real sense of kind of how you're tracking that today and what kind of metrics you'll have available to you. As I go through kind of these email metrics, some of them might be things that you have today. Some of them might be things you're interested in, but there should be something in here for everyone kind of based on what you're using. So I'll keep looking at this here, and we'll kind of go through some of these rates. So we'll start with the biggest one that we get questions on, and that is open rate. So you might be asking yourself, should you still trust open rates? And I would love to know in the chat if you currently do feel like you have great trust in your open rate. But there are a few different things that happen with open rate, like when you send an email. Some people are opening it and reading it. That's exactly what we want. That's the goal. Some of them are reading it in preview, so you might not get that kind of metric actually tracked there. Some people might be opening it in a mobile client, like Apple Mail doesn't sort of track email metrics anymore. So you don't actually see those. So your open rate might be changed a little bit more. You might see it artificially inflated. You might feel like it's lower than it should be. Some people have images blocked by their email client. We see that a lot internally. So that's something that we work with like kind of IT teams to sort of remove that restriction. And for Outlook, if you're sending to a large distribution list, it will often just report like that open as like 1, and you don't actually see individual open rates at all. But as far as open rate goes, there's definitely like some questions on whether or not you should trust it, but we really do still find it pretty valuable. I mean, it's not the sole metric you want to focus on, but as far as kind of looking at that metric as like the top open one, you are going to want to establish a baseline and create kind of your own benchmark there. So if you're sending an email to the same list kind of every week, like let's say you're doing your Monday all company newsletter, or your like Wellness Wednesday, or your like Friday email from the CEO, if you're sending that email every week and you're sending it to a similar list every week, you can still kind of gauge that open rate from week to week, and you still can have like some takeaways, but you're just going to want to look for your own benchmark there, rather than, we get a lot of questions on industry standards. And, we do see for internal email a huge jump as opposed to like external email sends. So we often do see open rates of 70, 80, 90%. But you really want to, if you're at like a 30% today, you don't want to goal yourself on a 70, right? We want to kind of work our way to that. We want to see improvements over time. So you can still use it as a general gauge if you're sending to the same sort of list. Or sending the same content each time. And keep in mind, especially with open rate, there's really only a few factors you can do to affect that, right? So it's going to be the subject line, it's going to be preview text, it's going to be who you're sending from, and that's really all you have to kind of work with there. I will flag if you are seeing either really, really high open rates or really, really low open rates. We do tend to work with kind of IT teams, again, to make sure that that benchmark is true to you and like actually is something pretty valuable. So, I definitely see people say like, oh, I have an 100% open rate on this employee newsletter, and I don't want to like burst anyone's bubble or anything like that, but that's almost impossible to achieve. So you might be having something like with an Apple client or something like that, where it's automatically marking all of those emails as opened. And on the flip side, if you're not seeing a high open rate at all, you might have something set up internally kind of with the IT team, or maybe you're using an external marketing tool to send those emails and they're just getting delivered to spam folders. So we often work with teams to kind of figure out exactly what that baseline is. So to move on from open rates a little bit, click-through rate is kind of like the new open rate. This is a metric you can completely trust. If someone is clicking in that email, you can bet that that person actually like clicked on that email. There wasn't like a client situation or anything like that. So you're looking at the total number of clicks an email receives divided by the total number of people who have opened that email. So you might see in your own kind of email tool some different things as far as like click-through rate or click rate, or like there's some different terms for it. We call it click-through rate, but really like that equation is the right thing for you to look at. And click-through rate can be affected really, really heavily by, of course, your CTAs in that email. So making sure that they're clear, they're concise, and they're really relevant to the message you're conveying. Like, for example, learn more tends to be like a fairly generic CTA. If you can kind of describe the action a little bit more, we have some good examples over here, like read the full CEO letter or RSVP for the event. So that's a good way to kind of affect your click-through rates. And then, just remember, for some emails, you might not need to offer the click. Like, you can probably put some of that content all in one email. So when you're looking at kind of metrics for specific emails, just ask yourself, like, did I want people to click through this? Did I just want to put the information in the email and see like read time or something like that? So just remember that not all emails require the click, and just keep that in mind as you're kind of building out your internal communications. Mobile usage is another metric that we find super, super important if you've got a lot of frontline or field or deskless employees. Also, we see it as an important kind of generational metric too. A lot of sort of younger employees might be opening those emails on their phone. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. And you should at least gauge this for yourself kind of on a baseline. We do this for every single email. So we don't see like a huge difference from one email to the next necessarily, but just to give yourself a baseline of like really like the desktop versus mobile opens, it might even indicate for you that you should look into, if you're getting a lot of mobile opens, maybe you should be adding like text and SMS as an internal comms channel, or maybe you should be making sure that those emails are all really mobile friendly and responsive. Again, that's something that we prioritize too, but knowing just kind of off the bat what this distribution looks like for you is really, really important, just to get kind of, again, that baseline with email.
Hey, Jamie, before you move on, there's a great question here about clicks. So in your opinion, do you find more clicks from buttons or just linked text with the CTA? Do you have a preference on that?
That's a great question. I always will say, like, kind of benchmark it and test it for yourself for sure. We do a mix. I mean, honestly, I will often, if I have one CTA, for example, I'll do both. Like, we often like hyperlink something in the text and include that same link in a CTA button and then kind of go from there. But yeah, there's kind of a mixed bag there. I think if it's in a beautifully well-designed email and that button is really like kind of popping, I think you'll see great results for that. But if you also have like kind of just a text letter email with just one hyperlink in it, you'll see great results from that too.
Awesome. Yeah.
One other metric that we look at for email is time read. This is one of my favorites. This isn't available in every email software. Like if you're using Outlook or something like that, you won't get this, but with an internal email tool with something like Workshop, you'll be able to see kind of time read data as well, which is fantastic for seeing like, okay, are people getting through that email? Are they really interested in the content? Are they glancing at it and kind of moving on? We love this one to kind of, we have customers that are exporting this data across like all of their different emails, and they're able to really see like some really interesting kind of engagement data on like, okay, our CEO letter is at like an 80% read rate, but this PR digest, everyone's just skimming because it's kind of like a newsletter or something like that. So we love this one as an email data point as well. And there's read time calculators kind of online, so you can even plug in kind of the text of that email and just get a gauge of how long it should take for them to read that email and kind of compare it to the data you get here. See here. Okay, so another data point that we love for email is filtering by departments, roles, location, really anything that you can think of. This is another thing that we have available for you in Workshop, or if you're using an internal email tool, this is something for you to look at too. But we're able to look at open rates and click-through rates and all of that, and to divvy it up between like different departments, filter it even all the way down to an individual view, which is pretty fascinating. And you're able to see different like engagement dips, like, okay, maybe the engineering team isn't opening a bunch of internal emails, or maybe the sales team engages best with emails that are sent on Friday afternoons because it's the end of the week, you know? So we're able to kind of look at those different things. So if you, another way to get this, if you don't have like a tool like Workshop to drill into the data, would be to do different sends, right? Like, so you could say like, I'm going to send this all hands newsletter and I'm going to send it to different department lists or something. And you could kind of get this like manually, but that's a great way for you to spot trends across different like departments or roles or locations, and work with like different team leaders and department leaders to improve that engagement with kind of future announcements. Another one that we really love as far as email data goes is survey data. So we offer the ability for you to embed kind of pulse surveys and get comments or feedback directly from that email. So you can get RSVPs that way. You can get kind of a pulse check on like, was this newsletter valuable to you? We see that one super often. But if you don't have an embeddable survey, again, you can kind of replicate that with a Typeform or a Google Form survey and include that as a little CTA at the bottom of the email and just get some general metrics. Again, you're not looking for like 100% of people who open that email to kind of fill out that survey, but you can get kind of that quick pulse check, which is really valuable as well. And the last kind of email metric I wanted to touch on was just campaign success. So when we talked about, you know, the idea of sending the weekly newsletter at the same time, like every Monday, or the CEO letter every Friday, you can go in and manually look at like, okay, the open rates, the click-through rates, kind of the engagement with that email individually over time. That's probably how many of you are doing that today. But you can also, using a tool like Workshop, you can look at the campaign as a whole in one specific view. So we're able to like basically do that automatically for you and put all those emails together. So you're able to see kind of how this campaign has been working over time, whether it's like events or product launches. So you don't have to stitch together kind of those open rates and click-through rates. And you can see that bird's eye view as well. And again, some other tools may have something similar, but that campaign view we find really beneficial because you're not doing a lot of like one-off sends or something. You know, if you're doing a lot of repeated emails or like sending the same template week after week, like this is a really good way to see kind of how people have been interacting with that campaign over time. And I will kind of close the book on the email metrics, but there are obviously a ton of other internal comms metrics and sort of channel data that you might want to look at as well. I'm going to hand that over to Kelsey to kind of dig into some of those too.
Yeah, perfect. I have to say before we move on, I'm loving the chat right now. People are having conversations, it's blowing up. It's great. I think that's one of my favorite things about the webinar is the like other conversations and like tips in the chat. That's great. So keep that coming. But
Yes.
yeah, so let's talk a little bit more about tracking other channels and strategies. So Jamie, you can go to the next slide here. There are other channels and strategies you can help track the overall success of your internal comms efforts. These are what we're going to go through today, so we'll dive in a little bit more into each of them. So the first one I want to talk about is channel effectiveness. Jamie, you can go ahead and hit there we go, the next slide there. So if these are ones that we see, they're common metrics to track for other key channels. Drop in the chat though, if there's any tools or metrics that you're tracking that we're missing from this list. We'd love to know about them. But essentially, aside from email, tracking metrics and other channels will help you create strategies and plans to deliver your message more effectively in the future. So common things we see are for your intranet, like the login numbers, usage time, what's the traffic or the top post of your intranet. Slack's another one we look at, your weekly active messages, what are the top performing posts, what are getting good interactions. SMS, we look at opens and clicks, and then Zoom attendance and one-on-one frequencies and attendance as well. So those are some other ones. I was just gonna jump over to the chat to see if there were other ones in here. Jamie, I don't know if you saw any. +1 to sharing to the chat. Perfect. So let's go ahead and move on to qualitative feedback. So this is like replies and comments. So it's great to look at your replies and comments from your internal comms. This could be a direct reply from your emails, or including, I know Jamie touched on it, but like a pulse survey, something as simple as, did you find this newsletter useful? We actually have a great article of 275 plus survey examples, just quick surveys you can include in your internal comms to kind of gauge how your employees are feeling. But essentially the goal here is to just get a gauge of how your employees are feeling about your internal comms. Are you seeing that they're generally positive, negative, or neutral? So I think we have another poll we're going to launch here, but how are you currently gathering feedback on your internal comms? We can go ahead and launch that.
There you go.
And we'll give a minute there.
A lot of people who don't have a great way right now.
Yeah. Couple survey softwares in there. Awesome. So the next one I want to touch on is engagement data. So this one is essentially looking for things that are naturally going viral. So if you look at your social media, what are your employees sharing on their social media channels? What's naturally blowing up? What content are they interested in your emails? So what links are they clicking? What resources that you're sharing are they clicking? And then additionally, is there a Slack message that's blowing up? Is there one that has dozens of reactions and lots of comments? Those are things that, by looking at these things, can show you what is or isn't working and what your employees find interesting. The next thing we want to talk about is the internal comms survey. So sending out an internal comms survey, it's a great way to see what is and isn't working in your internal comms strategy. We like to ask things like, how happy are you with the overall internal communication you currently receive? We also recommend including a list of scaling questions, 1 through 5, and then some open-ended questions like, what information do you wish you had more of? We recommend sending this out every 6 to 12 months. I think the goal here is starting a survey to get a benchmark of where you're currently at in your internal comms, and then putting your strategies and tactics behind it, running it again in 6 months, so you have a way to measure your efforts over time. We have a great resource. We have one built out. We'll drop this in the chat. It's an internal comms survey template, and it has all of these questions and more. It's fully customizable, so you can, edit it to your company's needs, but we will make sure to drop that in the chat. But if you're looking to dig a bit deeper, you can actually do a full internal comms audit. So we recommend running this once a year. And again, it's sending it out, getting that benchmark, putting your strategies and tactics in place, and then doing it again in 6 months so you can kind of see your efforts over time. But an audit can really help you identify where you might be missing the mark. And the goal here is to run it so you have enough qualitative and quantitative data to prove the impact of your internal comms efforts over time to key stakeholders and leadership. And we actually have a resource that we will also drop in the chat here. It's a 7-step guide to how to run an internal comms audit. It'll walk you through start to finish, and by the end, you'll have a nice little report that you can share to key stakeholders and senior leadership. It's running an audit, I think, is a great way to get buy-in from senior leadership.
And these will all be in the follow-up email too. So we'll have extra links for that as well.
Yes, thank you. We'll send all of these definitely in the follow-up. The next one I want to just touch on here is event signup. So tracking your efforts before and after your internal event signups, whether that's a training session, maybe you have an internal webinar, a new company initiative, an offsite, or a lunch and learn. And then traffic to key pages. So measuring page views and comments, whether that's on your internal landing pages, your microsite, or intranet posts. You can even create UTM tagged URLs so you can track where employee traffic is coming from. We'll drop in the chat here. Google has a free UTM tracker that you can use for your internal landing pages that you can then track the analytics in Google Analytics. So that's kind of a fun resource to have. I know we use it internally a lot. And then lastly, I want to touch on employee advocacy metrics. So this one is looking at things like active participation rate. So looking at what percentage of all employees are engaged in sharing company content. Who are your top contributors and posts? So what employees are sharing the most content and what posts are receiving the most engagement? And then looking at website from your social media, and then also using LinkedIn's native employee advocacy analytics. LinkedIn does a great job with their employee advocacy program. So 2 things you can do if you are a page admin, you can look and see employee posts and just kind of get a quick look at what employee posts are trending right now. Additionally, you can go a step further and use their formal employee advocacy program and suggest content to employees, whether it's a resource you launched or a product launch. And you can gather analytics to see if employees are sharing that content that you recommended. So I think I'm going to pass it back over to Jamie to talk about some indirect metrics to track.
You got it. Okay, so yeah, we definitely covered a lot of the direct things that you can do and measure in internal communications, but of course there are some other metrics outside of that it's really important for you to kind of keep informed about, and you can make a measured effort to help improve those. They might not be something that you directly affect or directly own. So outside of all of the other previous points, things like employee engagement data, different goals for different departments that you might be tied to, and things like employee turnover and retention rates. Again, internal communications should not be solely responsible for any of those, but you can kind of play a big role in improving those and becoming a strategic partner to a lot of the other members of the leadership team. And really kind of help drive results for the business overall. So just to touch on a few of these pretty lightly, employee engagement data. So I did see that there were some people that you were using something like Lattice or Qualtrics to run those employee engagement surveys. If you get those, once, twice a year, that information is really, really invaluable. And through some strategic initiatives, you can play a role in kind of helping to boost employee engagement. So you can look at kind of where to target and focus your communication strategy and really connect those employees to more of a purpose. I know personally, in all of the companies that I've ever been a part of, communication consistently is ranked lowest, of all the different kind of categories of that engagement survey. There's always, and this is why we love internal communication so much, because it's so important. No matter what, it seems like people are getting too much of the wrong information and too little of the right information, right? So we really love highlighting that as a focus and kind of stepping in, and I'm sure that's what you're all seeing at your organizations too, but stepping in and being able to say I can make a big impact there, I think is really, really, really cool and really powerful. But you might find through this engagement data that you need to do more specific and direct communication to, like frontline workers or a specific team or part-time employees or something like that. So there's a lot you can learn just from being informed and staying really close to that employee engagement data. Of course, progress towards company goals. We love including, we use OKRs, objectives and key results, for kind of our company goal framework. You might use something else, but whatever, kind of goal system you use, or if you just have kind of a company list of goals, being able to share that progress internally, I think is so important in terms of connecting everyone to the business and making everyone feel like they're, playing a role, and they're able to sort of celebrate or focus their efforts in the right place. So we loving doing comms plan that's specifically around company goals can be a really great way to build this up. If you haven't done anything like this in the past, it's a good way to create a feedback loop, and then like you kind of own the communication on that topic, which again makes you a really powerful partner for the leadership team as well. And you can do specific like manager email cadences around OKRs too, just to kind of keep everybody in the loop on that. I know, if you're doing like an all hands meeting or something like that once every quarter on your company goals, that can be like a pretty distant touch point. So having something that's on a more regular cadence might drive results just for the entire business more dramatically. Marketing metrics and goals. As a marketing leader, I feel like this is like so close to me. The tie to internal communications and marketing is like very obvious for me personally, but I know with other marketing leaders that might not be that way. So making sure that you are working with those marketing leaders and just being able to tell them like, do not underestimate your ability to impact the success of like a marketing initiative just by generating excitement for it internally, like a new launch or a new service or something like that. I mean, it's really like there's a huge halo effect when the employees are excited about something, like that will translate in your marketing. That will be something that like your customers and your prospects will be able to see as well. So a few other ways to kind of work with marketing would be things like looking at, are there shared goals that we could both like kind of work on together? Sometimes there are things like that you're overlapping on a little bit. Shared messaging for internal and external audiences. I can't tell you how many times we've had an internal nickname for something that has accidentally been communicated externally. Oh dear, like we got to be on the same page with that one, right? But that's something where you like having that be really tight and everyone understand like, okay, this is how we're talking about this internally and externally, and like this is how we communicate all together. I mean, that's something that's really, really valuable for me personally as well. And just repurposing external content. Kelsey and I send a marketing updates email to the entire company once a week with like, here's our new blog posts. Here's what we're launching next week. I get questions on that stuff all the time. So working on like my own cadence of internal communications, that's been really helpful too. And just employee reactions to marketing campaigns, sharing that with the marketing team is also really, encouraging and beneficial too. I think a lot of, internal communication celebrations can be things about like just collecting feedback from different employees and delivering it to the right people, right? And using employee stories or testimonials in marketing efforts. LinkedIn is definitely a place we see a lot of this, but it's also something where, we really like to make sure that our brand and our kind of messaging, again, is aligned internally and externally. Key business metrics and goals. Again, this is kind of tied to just like the OKRs and that kind of thing, but we'll just highlight, staying in tune with key business metrics for other departments, similar to what we've said here. That's just something where like, if you're seeing a department specifically struggle with one of their key metrics or key goals, working with them to highlight a communications campaign there might be a good way for you to like have that strategic partnership conversation again. Customer success metrics is another one that we like to highlight. I love this one just because I feel like you can play such a great role in like the happiness of a customer success or support team, just by, again, facilitating some of those stories and being able to highlight those internally, like being able to share, here are some happy customers from last week, and for everyone being able to see like, okay, I'm tied to like, making this person's life better. And that's a really, really rewarding feeling. So really, like, I think you can drive a lot of engagement with that team specifically just by, sharing some of those stories. So you can look at some customer success metrics there too, and see kind of how you can drive change in that department as well. And then lastly, we will talk about just employee turnover and retention rates. Of course, this isn't something you're going to be individually responsible for or directly responsible for, but it definitely signifies a problem that your efforts could help solve. You could look at turnover in particular departments and try to make those people feel, a little bit more connected to the business, to the company. You could clarify expectations that way. We've worked with a lot of companies on like new hire onboarding, for example, especially if you're seeing sort of some disengagement or confusion there in like in an employee's like first few weeks or months in a new role. You can do a lot to kind of deliver the right information to them at the right time. And lastly, I know this is going to be everyone's favorite part, but we're going to dive into how you can turn those metrics into something really shareable for the leadership team and kind of prove your ROI. So we've got a monthly reporting template that's really, really simple that we've seen make a really dramatic impact, I think, in a lot of organizations. So we will share that with you now, and I'll hand it back to Kelsey.
Yeah, perfect. So real quick, before I dive into leadership and ROI, I've seen a few questions in the chat. I just want to say we will definitely send the chat in our follow-up email. We'll send the recording, and we'll send our webinar slides. So you will get everything in a follow-up email. So
we have
let's jump.
Blurry slide here. So let me go ahead and try and fix that, or maybe Kelsey, if you are able to. Haha,
there it goes.
Sorry about that.
Perfect.
You will get the slide deck immediately following.
All right, well, let's dive into leadership and ROI. Jamie, you can toggle to the next slide here. So we want to reiterate that tracking metrics helps leadership see the value and impact of your internal comms efforts. So like Jamie mentioned, one thing we recommend is generating a monthly report. It's a great way to kind of report and show your successes, your opportunities, your key metrics that you can then present to key stakeholders and leadership. So we have a great resource that we will drop in the chat here. It's a monthly internal comms report. And you can customize this however you want to fit your company's needs. But a few recommendations we like to include in this are things like a summary of your overall performance, just quick details about how the team's performing and on its current goals. And then we like to share 3 to 4 slam dunks. So think of what are your top performing internal comms efforts for the month, whether that's your best performing email or your best performing intranet post. And then a story behind the gold medal winner. So what's your overall top performing communication for the month? And then we also like to include a table to showcase your KPIs. So for example, if you have one that's internal emails sent, you can list out what you targeted for and then what was actually sent, or email open rate, what your goal was versus what the actual was. And then lastly, including a section for opportunities just to showcase something that your team is focusing on for the next month. So we'll drop this in the chat, and we'll also send it up in our follow-up email. So kind of to recap, we hope you found a few practical ways to measure your internal comms through direct email metrics, direct comms metrics, and indirect comms metrics. And if you are, and we have a few key takeaways for you on the next slide. So this one is number one, Create your own benchmark and measure performance against those. We recommend an audit or a survey. It's a great way to start. Get that in place, put your strategies and tactics in place, and then, measure your efforts over time. The next thing is don't overlook qualitative data. Share stories and successes of viral content. Share what your employees are sharing, whether it's on socials or Slack or any of your internal comms channels. And then the third key takeaway is focus on the direct numbers you can affect, but stay informed on indirect and cross-company metrics. I think internal comms can have a general lift in all departments across the company. And then lastly, put together a short monthly report to share with leadership. We share ours as an email in workshop, and it's great because we're able to track that engagement with it. So that's really nice. And lastly, if you are in need of an internal comms tool, we can help. So Workshop was created with internal comms in mind. So with Workshop, you can measure clicks, open rate, read time, and you can see what employees have or have not read your emails. You can also get real-time analytics. You can push your messages to other channels that your employees are using most, whether it's Slack, Teams, or SharePoint. You can gather campaign data if you have a campaign for open enrollment or a weekly CEO letter. You can clearly know your next steps and improve your strategy over time. So if you have any questions about Workshop, you can reach out to either me or Janie. I know someone asked in the chat. We will definitely include our contact information and LinkedIn accounts in our follow-up email as well. Jamie, am I missing anything on that?
I don't think so.
Awesome. Well, we have a few great questions in the Q&A here, so let's jump over there. I know someone asked about surveys. Does it make sense to do small company culture surveys every 15 days or monthly? Or is it better, as you mentioned, every 6 months? I think also one thing you could include in your survey is just a direct call out. If you do it every month, asking, do you think we send surveys too often? I think directly asking your employees too, to see how they feel. Jamie, what do you think about that?
Yeah. And I love, I'm loving the chat and the Q&A. I feel like we'll answer some of these questions, but please feel free to put your own answer to these questions in the chat. I would love to hear your perspectives on that too. And if you have a question kind of for the group, go ahead and throw that in the Q&A, and we're happy to ask it broadly on your behalf. I know the chat can move pretty quickly, so we're happy if you need feedback, or if you're looking for how some other people handle some things, feel free to ask that question in the Q&A too. But on the surveys, one specifically, every 15 days or monthly, it can be a lot for a specific survey. We do, for example, on our internal newsletters, we have something at the bottom that's kind of a thumbs up, thumbs down. It's just was this internal newsletter valuable to you? That stays there, and people are able to kind of interact with that. It doesn't feel like an explicit, I emailed you and asked you for this survey response. So that's one way to kind of get recurring feedback via survey over time. For a larger multi-question survey, I do think measuring those maybe on a 6-month cadence is probably about right. I'm not sure, many of you have probably had experience with survey fatigue and specifically. So if you've got great advice on that, please feel free to add that into the chat. But we typically kind of look at it that way. Short surveys can be on a more regular cadence. Longer surveys should be, spaced out a little bit more.
Awesome. There's another question here about, do you have suggestions for measuring internal comms with separate, unique internal audiences, like corporate versus local offices?
Yeah, so the way we handle that at Workshop is that we're able to filter the data based on almost any custom property you can think of. So as long as you had a field for corporate versus local offices, we would be able to deliver that to you pretty instantly. If you don't have that, I do think you would have to do the manual option of sending it to specific lists and kind of gauging open rates and click-through rates over time. So you may it may be a little bit more challenging. I know I don't love like creating 6 versions of a newsletter, or even like setting it up to send 6 different audiences. So I would try to avoid that if I could, but as far as like distributing the data like that, I think that would be one of the only ways you could get it.
Cool. There's another great question that came through the chat. Any tips for increasing read-through rate on newsletters delivered via email? How do you get employees to read through the emails to the end?
Oh man, that's a great one. And honestly, we test our way to that a lot. And I've seen, I mean, we have hundreds of customers now. I've seen all kinds of templates work for different things. So you don't want the email to be insanely long as a starting point for sure, but you get a little bit more leeway, I think, in a well-designed email template that feels kind of easy to scroll through, as opposed to like a wall of text. We're gonna want to see those a little bit shorter, but I would, if you're looking at like something like read time data and you think it's a little bit low, probably, I mean, the first place I would start is the length of the email. Because that's usually like that read time data is based on how long they're engaging with that email. So, and there might be something to look at kind of like the very, very top of the email. If they're feeling like, they're glancing at it and they're leaving immediately, there might be something there at the top of the email that's not quite resonating with them. Maybe the maybe the subject line doesn't match the content or something like that.
Awesome. We also have another question here. In a multi-channel world, what are your tips for normalizing performance across entry points? We're using our intranet as a single source of truth, but it makes it hard to benchmark against rogue communications and other things that don't live in that space.
Got you. Man, that is a great question. I mean, as far as like multi-channel metrics, so we do, for example, we do look at like, we have the ability to push an email to different channels that you regularly use. So you can push the email to Slack, to Teams, to SharePoint, all that good stuff. And then we track kind of clicks and engagement based on that. So we do kind of get to that like single source of truth that you're looking for. But we absolutely still look at kind of channel effectiveness in like different channel metrics across the board. Like, I think sending everybody to one place sometimes doesn't work. I think there is a little bit, and that's why we do cross-channel posts. It's a little bit of like meeting employees where they're at. So for example, we always say like, you're never going to get an 100% open rate on an email, and that's not necessarily the goal, right? The goal would be to reach all of your employees via the different communication channels that they prefer. So we offer that kind of ability. Forcing 100% of your employees to go to an intranet for information can kind of feel more difficult. So we do look at different channel metrics kind of separately as well, and get to a point of like, okay, we feel like we have like a good layered communication strategy. Like somehow we are confident that we are delivering this message to all of our employees.
Jerry asked in the Q&A, do you have recommended timelines to create the baseline analytics and then update the stats ongoing? We're looking at all company geography and business division breakdowns.
Yeah, I usually update, like as far as like creating the baseline, I would say every 3 months is probably what we look at. And like we set goals quarterly. So that tends to work really nicely as far as like, okay, we're looking at, a broad open rate of 60% across our internal communication. So what we would like to get to as far as the baseline and the goal is a 63% open rate, within the next 3 to 6 months. So that's and that tends to align really well with just kind of quarterly planning and things like that. So I probably wouldn't look at it any more than that than quarterly. I think that gives you enough time to set those baselines and then goal off them.
Awesome. We have another question here in the chat. Could you provide some tips on soliciting qualitative feedback? How are you gathering qualitative feedback?
Oh, I feel like you're really good at this.
I don't know.
I mean, we've asked candidly in our emails, like just reply to this email. If you don't have anything that captures comments in an email or something like that, we will just ask specifically like, hey, did you find this newsletter valuable? Or like, what was your favorite part? Let us know. Outside of that, I've done things like I'll get, Slack DMs or something like that, that say like, hey, I loved last Friday's newsletter. I screenshot that and I send it to my boss. Like,
Yeah.
So there's a few different things you can do there, but I keep an eye out for it always. So and I know I've read like some people put like swipe files or something, like it's just like a folder on your desktop of like nice things that people have said. I love that.
I love that. I have heard that before too. Just almost like a little pick me up of nice things people have said that you can look in that folder for.
Yeah. And if you're looking for specific direct feedback, like if I was, and I've done this before, like we've been like, okay, our all hands meeting is we're just not feeling great about it. So I will just go directly and ask like 5 people from different departments, kind of different roles, what's your feedback on the all hands meeting? Can you give me something directly? So if you have to kind of get it manually, that's an option.
The smile file. Yes, that's right. Someone said in the chat. I love it so much.
Oh my gosh, that's the best thing.
Awesome. Let's see here.
I like this one. If you don't have a baseline, how do you pick a goal for a new communication vehicle like an internal newsletter? We have over 1,000 employees. If you don't have a baseline, usually what I would do is we typically send 3 before we start to change anything. We send 3 and then kind of create that baseline for us. But usually I don't, 3 is like, okay, now I have a pattern. Now I have a trend. It's not just like a coincidence, but I don't like to change too much until I've sent the same thing or done the same thing 3 times.
That's great advice.
There's one in the chat here too. If you leverage email and Slack or Teams, does Workshop track readership for both an email and a post so you can track readership across each channel and make sure employees do see the important required stuff if they show as not seeing it? So yes, if you are cross-posting, so Workshop, we're kind of email first, but we offer the ability to cross-post to text message, Slack, Teams, exactly what you mentioned here. And then we do track the views of that email from those different channels. So you are able to see kind of that performance across the board.
Awesome. It has been a great chat today. There's been a lot of great questions and just side conversations today. It's been great.
And we can export the chat and send it to everyone. I know I saw that somewhere. Yep. That we will also include that. I know it happens every single time. So you'll get the chat exported as well. So you'll be, if you missed an idea or something, you can scroll back through that after the event. I think we might have time for 2 more.
Yeah, let's see here. This person asks, I work at a university and we're looking to use SMS as a key channel to reach out to students. What key indicators should we look for with that? Clicks are sent concurrently with an email to our other audiences.
Yeah, I think so we do track that specifically, and I think any SMS tool would offer something along those lines.
I think so.
Yeah, but so the UTM tag, I did see that as a question earlier, kind of what is a UTM tag, or like, how do I use that? So a UTM tag allows you to set up a link that you set it up so that you can track exactly like where that link came from. So with SMS, I would offer probably something along those lines. If you can build them that way, so that you're able to say like, okay, this traffic came from this specific text. That would be one way to look at it. So I'm able to, if I set up a UTM tagged link, I'm able to say like, here's the source. So it was a text, here was the content, with like a couple of different hints for me on that. It is very easy to set up a UTM tag. You don't need another separate tool for it. I think if you just Google, and we've got one in here as well, we'll also include it in a follow-up, but you're able to kind of create some of those things. So often we'll make like, if we're launching something new, I will, or Kelsey will make a link that is for the team sharing it out, like out on LinkedIn or whatnot. So I'm actually able to track traffic from our employees almost every time we launch something, if we're not like running too fast, which you know how it is. So, but that's an option, and you don't need a software or anything special to do that. You can set one up through Google very quickly.
Do we have time for one more? There's a great one that just came in the chat.
Yes.
Multiple newsletters can be a lot to produce and manage. Have you seen success with word of mouth comm strategy cascading down from senior leaders to lower level people managers to their direct reports?
That's a good question. I would love to know, from everybody else as well. Have you seen success with a word of mouth comm strategy and a cascading strategy? I think what we've focused on with that, and depends what it is probably
it's a probably accurate answer.
Yes. We do a lot, and we see a lot, and we work with a lot of companies that do specific manager communication. So a lot of it is about empowering managers with the right information to be able to cascade down, and sort of leaving it to them, or giving them the resources that they might need to be able to do that. So we kind of wind up in a place where, maybe it's not a newsletter, a multiple newsletter with like a bunch of different sections in it, that are for a bunch of different groups. But we'll put together like a specific manager sort of email. Or what else we've done in the past is we have an audience segmentation feature. So you can change the content of a row in an email depending on the audience that you're sending to. So we'll say, okay, this row only shows up for managers, for example, and it'll have like links to different like content or resources that those managers might need. That's a way to send the same newsletter to different audiences, but be able to kind of sort of segment it and still deliver unique information to different audiences without having to send 16 versions of an email.
I also think too, maybe word of mouth from, senior leadership to lower level people managers, but then from there, then sending the newsletter out from that level to their direct reports. Taylor put in here, word of mouth is good if the prompts are strong. Sometimes it's a game of telephone though, and 100% agree.
I like Amanda's, the best way to get word of mouth is to tell people it's confidential. I feel like I want to put that in our Happy Monday Club newsletter. That's very funny.
Incredible.
Incredible.
This is awesome. Jamie, is there anything else to add or any last minute notes?
I don't think so. Thank you so much, everyone, for being such great participants. We would love to hear your feedback. If you have any specific questions for us, feel free to contact us. You'll get all of these resources that we've mentioned today, the chat, the recording, everything you can think of in a follow-up email as soon as the webinar finishes processing.
Yep.
And I think that's about it. If I missed your question, I'll send you a direct email as well to get that tackled, because I think we still have a handful of open ones here.
Yeah, there's a couple yeah. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. This was great. We had a lot of fun.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.